script. Brandon, turn me on. I'm going to get us started because it's 9 o'clock. Come on, my friends. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. Come on in and have a seat. Welcome to you who are streaming with us. It's a little after 9, so we're going to get ahead and start, even though not everybody is absolutely in their seat and settled yet. But we want to keep faith with our sisters and brothers who are streaming with us this morning. Welcome, everyone. Let me take just a second to provide the context for our conversations. We are I am passionately desirous of as a faith community, having an experience of testing our deep listening muscles, in which we listen across the divide and we really challenge ourselves to be courageous in the exercising of these deep listening skills by putting us into the center of what often are very polarizing conversations in our culture. It's starting here in June, but we're going to continue through July as well. The last 2 Sundays we've spent talking about gun violence prevention. Today we talk about reproductive choice. And then after 2 Sundays with this topic, the first Sunday in July will be about homelessness. And then we'll be talking about the death penalty. So I hope you get the idea of what we're doing. And interestingly enough, we are choosing topics that the National Episcopal Church has already taken a position on. So we're going to be in dialogue not only with one another and with our friends who ground us in experience, but also with the National Episcopal Church. And we are having a dialogue with representatives of our state legislature. So that is the plan. Today, we're grounding ourselves in experience. And then next week, we'll talk about some other responses related to experience. But without further ado, I want to introduce, welcome, and express my gratitude to my immediate right, Representative Jasmine Clark, who's an Atlanta native. She holds an Emory PhD in microbiology, teaches at several universities in the Atlanta area, and her district is in Gwinnett County. On my far right is Alice Limehouse, daughter of this parish, an attorney at... What's funny about that? I thought it's a graceful way to talk about your lineage here. No. She is an attorney at Smith & Lake, specializing in family law and mediation, and is the mother of Phoebe and Caleb. In the middle of these 2 guests is Tanya Gibbons Washington, a native of Columbia, South Carolina, who moved to Atlanta after 15 years of living in New York. When she speaks, you will know that she is a child of South Carolina, not of New York. She's the mother of Izzy. She's a manager with the Buckhead Wealth Management firm. And I want simply to welcome them. Will you join me in warmly welcoming them now? We have some things that we could say, and we'll hold the World Health Organization definition of reproductive rights and also the Episcopal Church's weigh in on all of this until next week. But right now, we simply want to, I want to energetically say how important this morning is. Because too frequently, this issue is presented in a very reductionistic, simplistic way. And when we ground ourselves in experience, we begin to see nuance, we begin to see the multifaceted nature of all of our issues. And I encourage you and invite you to listen deeply to the experience of these three panelists. And remember that it is not okay to blame, shame, attack somebody else or yourself. Please keep in mind that our best intentions sometimes land with a different impact because our intention is coming out of where we are in our social location, and because of somebody's having a different social location, they may hear something that this white straight man really intends great things from, and for some reason, women or people of color or say, Ed, let's be a little more culturally competent on your part. So we are not avoiding real and rarely shared stories of women who have been forced to make terrifically difficult and often painful decisions. So the plan is to hear from them and then save 20 minutes for Q, and I like Q and response rather than Q and answer. And we'll do the same thing next week. So here we go. I first want to direct my questions to Alice. Thank you. I'm going to give it to you. I'm the person you get to share with. You and I get to be Christian sharers of the mic today. So you grew up at St. Luke's, faced a difficult decision some 21 years ago, and can you talk with us about it?
Good morning, everyone. I am Alice Limehouse, and I did grow up here. I started coming to church here when I was about 9. So about 21 years ago, when I was a senior at Agnes Scott College, I got pregnant. And many of you know my daughter, who is Phoebe, and she also grew up here. When I was 23 years old and not married and hadn't quite graduated from college yet, many, many people advised that this would be a good opportunity for me to exercise the choice that I had to have an abortion at that time. And it was something that I deeply considered and prayed about and worried about. Being not married and so young, it was not an ideal time to have a baby, obviously. Privilege in that I was about to have a college degree. I wasn't a teenager, so not as young as some people are when they are in these circumstances. And I had wonderful family support and support of family friends. And at the time I had no idea how difficult it would be to be a single mom, but I knew that I wasn't ever going to be homeless because I had this privilege. We were going to be okay even if it was hard. And so I made the decision to not have an abortion, but to have the baby, who is now a rising junior at Howard University. Yay! And I'm, enormously grateful that I had that choice, and that for me it was a choice that turned out the way that it has. But I am also deeply cognizant of the fact that not everybody has the privilege that I had when I was in that situation, and it's very important to me that my daughter and that all women have the choice to have that autonomy over their lives and their bodies. So.
Perfect. I'm going to come and stand by you because I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Let's take a little more time for you to dig a little deeper about kind of where you stand on this issue, both for what you just said, the need and your preference for your daughter and her health care, but also your law firm has been a sponsor for the Feminist Women's Health Center. And if you could just talk a little bit about that, I would really appreciate it.
So I work for a wonderful law firm, Smith & Lake. We're based in the Decatur area. And we recently sponsored an event for the Feminist Women's Health Center. It was an evening of cocktails, hors d'oeuvres, speakers, that sort of thing, the usual sort of thing. And it was important for us as a firm, particularly in light of recent legal changes in Georgia, to take a stand and to be public about it. In law practice, it's really easy to kind of take the middle road, or not really dig in on these issues, because you don't want to alienate potential clients or potential referral sources. But we as a firm decided that our firm is all women, and we had decided that this was something that was important to us and that we wanted to be public about. We also have all sponsored and made donations to Planned Parenthood.
Perfect, thank you. So I hope that you all are, Tanya, you're up next and you don't need money to share. But I hope that we're beginning to have a kind of a field of nuanced responses. Here's a person who chose not to have an abortion and is very strong in supporting the whole issue of choice. And it's just not a kind of a one-dimensional thing. Now, we're going to make it even more complicated, because we're going to talk with Tanya, who chose a late-term abortion for medical reasons. And we're going to ask her if she doesn't mind to tell us about that story, because it's extremely complicating for the whole picture. Please.
Hi, good morning. Yes, my situation was also I wanted to be a mother my entire life. And I had to have IVF to have a child. And so I got lucky. I got pregnant my first try. I thought my world was just the happiest moment ever, until I went in at 18 weeks just for a normal checkup, and my baby boy Jack had died in utero. And my OB, this is in New York City, where everyone thinks New York City laws are very open, and but my OB was not able to do anything about it. He could not perform the surgery, so because it was too late. So they called up the Columbia University to ask them if they could perform and it is an abortion still at 18 weeks. They would perform it, but I would have to be awake during the surgery. So the best that they could do, after making many, many calls, was to send me to an abortion clinic over on Madison Avenue. So here I was carrying my dead baby through protesters screaming at me, "You're killing your baby, you're killing your baby." And I have to go, what I'm going through, I have to walk past all these protesters into a clinic where there are women there that have the right to choose that they're there to terminate their pregnancy, and I am there because of fetal demise. And it was the most heart-wrenching moment of my entire life. But let me tell you a little bit about the people that were in that abortion clinic. They took me back there, and when they did the ultrasound, I begged that little Jack was still alive. I said, maybe he woke up overnight. And they apologized and said, no, he did not. So they took me back to have the surgery. And when I laid back, unbeknownst to me, everybody held hands. Everybody in there held hands. And this woman just kind of looked over me and she said a prayer for me and for the most loved, wanted baby in the world. So these are not monsters in these clinics. These are people that care for women that want their baby so much, but also women that deserve to have the choice. It may not be at the moment that they can have the baby. It may be 10 years later that they can have the baby. So it was a very traumatic. I mean, when I left there and I went home, all I remember, even to this day, is crawling up in a fetal position in my downstairs bathroom and sobbing uncontrollably for months and months. And I walked around with a big pregnant belly, and then I have to tell everybody that my baby died, and then all of everything that I went through. So I carry it with me now. I ended up having my daughter Izzy, but she was my 8th pregnancy. So it was just a very traumatic time.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I'm just so aware that you didn't have to do this morning. And I really appreciate your sharing all of this. I did want to underscore that most OBGYNs don't see women until 8 to 10 weeks along.
Right. So that's another thing. I kind of consider myself a reproductive expert. I may not have the medical degree, but when you go through 8 pregnancies, I know when a heartbeat starts. I unfortunately know when a heartbeat ends. But most women, because I was lucky with IVF, I could go and see a doctor, from the very beginning.
IVF means? In vitro.
In vitro. But most women here, all over, when you find out you're pregnant, you call your OB and say, I'd like to make my first appointment to see the doctor. They won't even see you till you're like 8 to 10 weeks pregnant. Will not see you. That is the first time. I have friends that moved from New York to Georgia and recently got pregnant, and she was like, I don't understand this. They won't even see me till I'm 10 weeks. Whereas 10 weeks, but our state is now saying that the new law is 6 weeks. Women don't know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. Very rarely do they know. And I am born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina. I spent 15 years in New York City. I'll tell you everything about being a Southerner I was so proud of. I wanted to bring my Izzy back to the South to show her what true Southerners are like. And now I'm just ashamed. I don't know. I'm hesitant to raise my daughter here in Georgia now with this type of law, and just like what little value our legislators have in women. And I have a hard time thinking that my daughter would be raised like that. And the other main thing I wanted to say is, everybody said, you're so brave to get up here today. You know what? We all need to work together so women don't have to be brave to talk about loss. So, the one thing.
Thank you. And so, Representative Clark, while we're talking about legislators, we're not going to stereotype you into that group. So we'd like for you to kind of distinguish yourself at this point, differentiate yourself. So if you could just kind of unpack this business about how Georgia leads the nation for the highest rate of maternal mortality, and if you could tell us more about that, and also simply to put this bill, House Bill 481, into a medical perspective, please.
All right. So first to start.
And again, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening. I like the idea of deep listening. So I will start off by saying that when it comes to getting pregnant in Georgia, unfortunately, especially for a woman that looks like me, women of color, even more so than white women or any other demographic, it is dangerous to carry a pregnancy to term. To me, it's a very interesting someone to carry a pregnancy while not also addressing the fact that I could very well die from that pregnancy. And so I think this is a perspective that wasn't really brought up a lot, putting the two together. Some people did, but a lot of people didn't. But it's an important one, because you're telling me, a living, breathing human being, I do not have the choice on whether I live or die, because I could very well die. And that might sound like hyperbole, but it's not. This is actually some people's reality. And then when it comes to HB 481, I think just looking at it from a medical perspective, you're criminalizing doctors in a state where actually half, literally half of the counties, there are 159 counties in Georgia, so let's round up to 160. There are 79 that do not even have an OBGYN. Let's round up to 80. Half of our counties do not even have an OBGYN. This affects women's ability to get prenatal care. This affects women's ability to get care in an emergency situation, ability to get postpartum care. And so all of this exacerbates our maternal mortality rates. They're married. You can't unmarry them. We also have a state where there's a large number of people that do not have health insurance. And as hard as we tried to expand the access to affordable health insurance to more Georgians, including women, those efforts were just shot down every time. And so now, not only do they not have an OBGYN, but there's a lot of people who don't have insurance and will not go to a doctor unless they feel sick. And they don't feel like pregnancy is sickness. They're just like, oh, women been doing this all along, I'll just, go through. And they're not getting the prenatal care that they need to know the signs and symptoms that can lead to maternal mortality. So when you criminalize doctors, let me tell you what doctors do. They don't come work in your state. So we are not going to fix our problem of our extreme OBGYN shortage and just a reproductive health care shortage in our state by making doctors criminals for performing medical procedures, which that is what this is. It is a medical procedure. One thing that I also find very interesting is this idea of choice. You should have the choice. This has been tried and decided by the Supreme Court, not in one case. It's not just Roe v. Wade. There are at least 3 cases, one that was just recently in 2016, that strengthened this idea of reproductive choice. You should have a choice when making medical decisions. What if in a dystopian world we decided that because of the way we feel that about, let's say, premarital sex, that we decided that every person who was not married had to get an abortion? What if we flipped it and turned it around to where our laws changed it and people did not have a choice to have a baby? Imagine that type of world. But that's what we're doing on the opposite extreme. We're saying my beliefs I'm going to pigeonhole your situation into one situation and completely ignore nuance, completely ignore all of the different factors that could lead to someone making a decision to have an abortion. And sometimes that decision is a decision they actually don't want to go through this, but maybe it's a difference between living and dying for themselves. Maybe it's the difference between getting chemotherapy for cancer or carrying a baby to term, but you might now actually die and the hormones are exacerbating that cancer. All of these things are possibilities. And so we should not make laws that then tell you that first we have to perform, we have to hear a heart tone, or you have to at least listen for a heart tone at 6 weeks. Because let me tell you how that works in the doctor's office. Most people, if you watch movies and you see people get ultrasounds, they do the little wand on the belly and the person's looking at the screen. That is not how you find anything at 6 weeks. Because of the size of the embryo, because at 6 weeks is still considered an embryo, that has to be done intravaginally. So what if you're dealing with a rape case? What if you're dealing with someone who just does not want to deal with that particular trauma at the time? And this is now basically in law. This is what I have to do in order. And then if I hear anything, then all your choices are gone. So.
Representative Clark, I really appreciate how much you've abbreviated all that material.
Yes.
I do want you to revisit one other thing.
Okay.
I think that too frequently we are not aware of how dangerous pregnancy is, and the whole incident of infant mortality or troubled pregnancies, particularly of people of color. Can you just unpack that just a little bit more, please?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research right now just trying to figure out why this is happening. First of all, in the United States as a whole, our maternal mortality rate is actually very high, and it shouldn't be that way in an industrialized, modern society. People should not be dying, from complications from childbirth, but they are. Then, if you go and you zoom into Georgia, our numbers are even higher than the national rate, which is already embarrassing. Then if you zoom in a little bit further, you find that African American women in Georgia are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than some of these other demographics. When trying to figure out the exact reasons why, they've looked at a number of factors. So a lot of those are prenatal. And not even prenatal. This I am even thinking about having a child. Your health in general, up to the decision to have children, can affect pregnancy. Things like hypertension and depression and certain other medical issues. If you're going to decide to have children later, you kind of need to be thinking about these things and managing these things ahead of time. So now let's go from I'm not thinking about having a child to now I am pregnant. Prenatal care. Again, that is so important. It is a very important part of a pregnancy. Most pregnancies, maybe, they're pretty normal. You go in, everything's fine. You take your vitamins, everything's fine. But there are times where everything is not fine. And you need to be seeing a doctor. And a lot of people don't. We find that a lot of people who do die in childbirth or shortly after childbirth have limited prenatal care. Then another very important aspect, because here in Georgia, you do have opportunities if you fall in a certain income level to get access to, let's say, health insurance that's specific for the pregnancy and for the baby, if you fall in that income bracket. Once you have the baby, it's not like you have a baby and then poof, everything is better, everything goes away. You still need to be seeing doctors. You still need to be paying attention to signs that something is wrong. Here's the issue. You don't know what the signs are if you've never really seen a doctor anyway, for someone to tell you this is what you need to look for. And then we have an issue right now, and it's more of a cultural issue, and I'm not really sure how we fix this, where especially when it comes to black women, when they go to the doctor, a lot of times when they say they're in pain, it's not treated the same way if someone else said they were in pain. I don't know if I'm not really sure why this is, but it's something that a lot of people have spoken about. Even famous people like Serena Williams can't even, go in and say there is something wrong, and people believe them. Oh, you're just being dramatic. You're a strong black woman. You can handle it. Use those strong black woman genes that you have to fight through it. And no, so all of that stuff plays a part in our maternal mortality rates. And we need to study this more. but not just study. We need to do something about it. And I think if we're going to make laws that are going to affect reproductive health, let's make laws that affect reproductive health in a positive way, that help women with their reproductive choices and not strip women of their reproductive choices. Right. I agree with that. Yes, I focused on one community, but yes.
Yeah, 2 points are here that pregnancy is dangerous, and it is oftentimes more dangerous than some alternatives. And then the community of color is particularly vulnerable. So let's just make those points. One more question, and then we'll open up. It is important for those of us who are not in on the debates around the Capitol, just to hear about in the hearing room. I understand there were doctors and nurses who were begging lawmakers not to pass this bill. Can you talk a little bit about your being both a medical professional and also a legislator and hearing all of that?
So I'm a freshman legislator, so I just got there.
Got it.
When I was running on the campaign trail, I ran as a science candidate who wanted to come in and make sure that when we are making decisions, we are using the data, the evidence, the fact, the science in order to make these decisions that affect people's lives. I got there and I realized that I'm going to need a whole lot more of me there to really get things done, because I saw with my own eyes multiple times, this debate and other debates, where an expert who does this for a living, this is their job, this is their life, this is how they make money. You know, this is what they do, and they give the facts, they give the statistics, they stand there, and a legislator looks back at them and says, okay, well, I don't believe all of that. And the frustration that you feel knowing that there is a person sitting in a position who has probably never cracked open a medical book at all, telling the doctors who not only perform these procedures but have gone to school and specialize in these things, I don't believe you. Just because if they were to actually take into consideration what that expert or that doctor is saying, then they would have to admit that what they're doing is wrong.
Got it.
And so it's a power play. It's it allows, I mean, they're sitting in the seat where they get to make the ultimate decision. And I saw this in multiple issues, but specifically when it came to House Bill 481, as I sat in the hearing, doctor after doctor after doctor, lawyers, multiple people in these bills said, this is a bad idea. This bill is bad for Georgia. It's bad for Georgia's women. It's bad for Georgia's doctors. It's bad for our state. We don't need to do this. And they were completely ignored. On the opposite side, you just had a bunch of emotional testimony. And emotion is good. And when I listen to the other side, I hear them. I hear their pain. I hear what they're trying to say. I truly believe that that individual person probably feels like, you know, abortion is bad, so I don't want to have it here. But one person or one person's emotions or 10 people's emotions should not trump all of the science and everything else that is there that says that people need access to these individual choices. One thing I love, like on this panel, we talked about choice. You have a choice to not have an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
All we're asking is that you have the
Choice.
to also, if that is a choice that you need to make for yourself.
Thank you very much. We are on time. So, thank you. Yes. Questions, please. If your heart's beating fast, you're the first person supposed to speak.
I know that this bill has passed. I know that it's going to end up in the Supreme Court. But is there any other thing that can be done by Georgians to change the atmosphere in the legislature to a more positive kind of thing, not just for this, but for other issues that you talked about?
The short answer is vote. I mean, we really, I wasn't kidding when I say we need more, not me, but just more people who are actually really willing to first listen, and also to consider or use the actual data and not just make decisions because someone is paying them to make that decision, or because that's what they feel is politically expedient. We need people who are really down there legislating. And so, I mean, the short answer is vote. Yeah.
Just kind of a follow-up question. What are the reasons and the emotions that are driving these legislators to vote for abortion? Excuse me.
Against.
Anti-abortion.
Well, I think one of them is it's platform-wise. This has always been one of those platform issues that riles people up and gets people excited. Another emotion that I see, if you notice, it's happening across the nation. This is not by accident. There are bigger groups, think tanks, that go to these legislators and tell them, this is what we're doing this year. I think that given the makeup of the Supreme Court now, they feel like right now is the time that if we're going to completely get rid of reproductive choice, this is now, and so we need to do it now. So each state is just trying to be that state that gets their case to the Supreme Court. I can tell you right now, Georgia's falls very short of anything that would be able to overturn any of those cases. So it won't be Georgia that does it, but they just went through the motions so that they can go back to a base and say, they tried, we tried, and that's it. But they admit that it is unconstitutional, but it's kind of like.
So I have two questions. One is that I know when they brought that bill, kind of floated it, there was more for it, right? And then when they really brought it to vote, some people switched and voted against it. It still was passed. So the first question is, what were the arguments that were successful in switching people to vote against it? The second is, I live in town Atlanta, so my representatives are, voting the way that I believe.
Yeah.
If I call people outside of where I'm represented, do they even listen? Do they care?
All right, so I would say yes, they do care. Call everybody. I got messages from everybody. And then, I'm sorry, what was the first question? What changed people's mind? Okay, I'm gonna let you guys in on a little bit of inside baseball. And this is the reality. Even some of the people who voted yes would secretly come to us and say, I really did not want to vote for this bill. So many people were against it on principle, on constitutionality. Even if they were philosophically against abortion, they were against the bill because it was actually a very poorly written bill. But the way that politics works is that when you're a legislator, there are things that you want, like your bills to pass, or a chairmanship, or the nice office with the great admin, or a combination of all of those things. And especially when a party is in the majority, they have power over all of those things. The speaker is in the majority. They determine what bills even get to the floor. So you have all of these factors that you can hang over someone's head. And one of the biggest factors is we'll primary you. You will lose your seat to someone who will fall in line. This is something that we'll have to probably watch for if the House were to even switch, because this is not a party thing. This is just what the people in power do in order to get what they want. So in this case, they have a lot of leverage and a lot of things that they can kind of hold over people's head to get them to do things that they don't want to do. But I can tell you, there were at least 10 people who voted yes who came back afterward and legitimately apologized and said, I did not want to vote for this. I am actually not for this at all, but I had to do this, or my constituents told me this is what they wanted, or whatever. But yeah, it's...
Real quickly, I know someone in my family who, prior to Roe v. Wade, had an abortion. And then later, they actually delivered a healthy child. I don't know the circumstances why that person chose an abortion, other than that she was widowed at that point in time, and probably was in circumstances that she chose to have an abortion. But she almost died in childbirth after having an illegal abortion in the 1940s. And I'd just like you to address the issue of what is going to be happening with the law as currently written.
So this is, what you're saying is actually very real. The only thing, so making abortion illegal does not stop abortions from happening. It just stops people from seeking safe abortions. So people are still going to make that decision, but they're going to do it in more shady manners. The image of a coat hanger is that's real. Like, that is what some people were legitimately doing in order to end pregnancies. We don't want to go back to that. We don't want people to be taking drastic measures in a country that has access to, safe abortion. It's a medical procedure that's been done for decades, and we don't need to take the options of any medical procedure away. When a person decides that they want to do something, they will do it. And so this is not going to end, legislating people's bedrooms and legislating people's decisions with their body does not end abortion. You're not going to make people stop having premarital sex or, stop getting pregnant just because you make these laws. You're just going to make it less safe for them.
This is a faith-based community, so I'm going to, in a safe place, I'm going to throw out another idea that one of the reasons that people are voting against abortion is their sincere belief that it's murder. And so how do we address that? Because I think that's a very legitimate way to look at this, that whether it's at the moment of conception, or it's at the heartbeat, or it's during delivery, surely that's too late for people to believe that this is a human being, and it's not just a woman's choice over her body. She's imposing her will over another human being, and that is called, I'm sorry to say, murder, and it's illegal. So how do we balance, and I definitely respect what's being said here today, and I understand the problems with protecting women's health legitimately, but let's face it, a lot of people use this as birth control, and it's not control over your body. There are other ways to control that, and it's available to all economic groups, I believe.
So number one, let me just respond by saying, yes, it was very safe for you to say all those points. And that, Renee, you're loved here, and that's really important. And these are legitimate questions. So let's drill down, any of you, about how you would respond to the whole issue of this is life, it's taking life, whether it's human life yet or not, but it's taking life, and that's murder. And then what about the whole business of the birth control deal? I mean, we've got a lot of things to unpack here, but who wants to go
I
first?
can throw out a few
Yeah,
things.
sure.
One is that I think that I'm trying to think. When is conception? I guess that's and when is the heartbeat found? For me, I think that is something between me or a partner, husband and wife, and God. Not for everyone else to make a decision for me and my body. So that, number one, is for me. Two is that everyone thinks that Planned Parenthood is nothing but an abortion clinic, and that's wrong. They provide services to women of all economic levels, and so that's kind of such as birth control, right? But we have to have places like that for people to get birth control, and so.
All right, so I'll address the birth control issue first. The majority of people who have abortions are not using them as birth control. When you actually look at the demographics of people who are having abortion, a lot of them are faith-based. They are religious. A lot of them are already parents. So these are people who have already had a child, and then they get pregnant again, and for whatever reason they make this decision. The majority of people who do this, they are usually in their 20s. So it's not like a bunch of teens showing up at the abortion clinic. But there are a lot of people who are over 30, going into their 40s, that are choosing to have abortions. We also have to understand that a lot of people report when they go to abortion and they report their contraceptive use, they say, yes, we do use condoms on a regular basis, or maybe the one time we didn't, or for whatever reason the condom broke or whatever. And there are a lots of times where contraceptive fails. And if you can imagine being on birth control and then finding out you're pregnant and you're like, well, I did what I was supposed to do and now I'm pregnant anyway. And then when it comes to access, again, remember, we live in a state where half of the state doesn't even have an OBGYN. And so now we're getting more advances in the availability of contraceptives, but everyone cannot take a birth control pill. It is contraindicated for a lot of people, such as people who have a history of stroke in their family, blood clot issues. So birth control pills can kill you too. Like it's possible to die from hormonal contraception, and everyone can't just run to a doctor and get an IUD put in because the doctor is 120 miles away. So I think that we have to take all of these things into account, and when we talk about abortion as a medical procedure, to understand nuance and understand that everybody's situation is different, and just because you want to stick it to the one girl who you feel is irresponsible, you're affecting people who really, this is a choice that they really need to have as a part of their list of choices. When it comes to the whole idea of abortion being murder, here's the truth about it. There is a specific legal definition of murder, and an abortion does not fall under that. If you notice, most of these state laws, if the person who, usually the state law goes after the doctors, and usually not after the woman. Some of them are now they're starting to try to go after women too. But that's because there's very specific legal definitions for murder. And this does not fall under that umbrella. You know, we have options to save lives, and you actually have an option to not save a life. And I know this is it seems, if emotionally, I can understand the emotion behind it, but the truth of the matter is, if I have a rare blood type, and someone in this room needs my blood to live, I can look them in their face and say, no, I do not consent to give you life. And I can do that. If they need an organ from me, I have to opt in and say, I will give you my organ. An embryo and a fetus are essentially basically on kind of like a life support. And that life support is fortunately, the mother. And so if I take away the rights of the mother to give to the fetus that may or may not be viable, then I'm doing an injustice to that mother. A lot of the laws focus on the word viability, because once the fetus is viable, now we're talking about something different. But prior to viability, you're really, yes, it feels like a human being, and you're calling it your baby, and you've probably given it a name. You can't wait to find out if it's a boy or a girl. I understand all those because I have children. But it's not viable yet. Maybe in 1,000 years, technology will be to the point where we can completely remove a 6-week-old fetus from the womb and let it grow, in a container or something. But we can't do that right now. That's not possible. So you cannot separate or take away one person's rights over something that is technically non-viable.
So what I'm going to do is press the pause button. We're not going to press the stop conversation, because we are committing 2 Sundays to this. If you will come back, we will continue, both based in experience and in law, with an open invitation and a safe invitation to say exactly what you feel and think that may be dissenting from anybody who's sitting in these chairs. And I hope by introducing some language and some positions from some religious organizations to move us to a both-and position rather than an either-or position. Because remember, I'm trying to say here at St. Luke's that the polarization trap that our brain is in hasn't worked. We've got to get to a different place in our brains than an either or, I'm for or against and all of that. And it's so very nuanced. So we're putting it on pause. We're going to thank these friends who were with us and come back next week. Thank you very much. Very courageous, very courageous, very courageous. Thank you all. Let's go to church.